My name is Elton, and this is a mini-series on my channel where I'll be taking a look at artifact sets that have similar effects and uses, specifically for characters who can utilize them well, but have to go through some sort of constant debate of which one to choose. I hope to shed some light on how these sets differ and whether the trade-offs that each of them have are actually worth it, as well as how units can actually proc these effects properly. However, like always, I have to give a disclaimer. I'm not here to calculate percentages or crunch the numbers on any character's damage output. I am only here to explain how these artifacts work, how well they work in the current state of the game, and how well these effects can be taken advantage of. I am not here to shame, humiliate, or insult anyone who chooses one set over another for their builds. I also want to say that I do compile my information from the most up-to-date guides from the Kaching Main's website, as they have a plethora of very helpful information, so if you're wondering where I got all this knowledge, I got it from there. Now, with all that said and done, welcome to Artifact Antagony. In the current version of Genshin Impact, as of the release of this video, we finally have another Harbinger available to play. And with Arlecchino came a game mechanic that existed before in the form of a specific enemy akin to Fontaine, but never before had we seen it with a character. Not to mention, an accompanying artifact set came out with 4.6's releases too. Fragment of Harmonic Whimsy is one of the two new artifact sets released in 4.6. Its 2-piece effect gives an 18% increase in attack, while the 4-piece effect states that whenever the bond of life either decreases or increases, the damage dealt by the equipped character is increased by 18% for 6 seconds with a max of 3 stacks. And the set that I'll be putting it up against is Marechaussee Hunter. I talked about this in my last episode for Artifact Antagony, where I put it up against Vermilion Hereafter, so please go check out that video if you want to. But to quickly refresh, its 2-piece effect increases the damage of the wielder's normal and charge attacks by 15%, and the 4-piece increases crit rate by 12% for 5 seconds when their HP increases or decreases. There's a max of 3 stacks. The mechanic that I'll be really focusing on though is the Bond of Life. The Bond of Life is essentially a blocker that is placed on a character that prevents your character from being healed. It is based on a percentage of that character's max HP, and they can be healed only after you healed through the Bond of Life. Your character can still sustain HP loss with the Bond of Life active. And as of right now, there are only a very few ways to gain a Bond of Life. It is only found in Arlecchino's kit and through weapons, as well as the F2P operatives, who are a type of enemy that I mentioned before. And the incentive of clearing the Bond of Life is to get extra damage out of it after you get rid of it. This is made clear by the artifact set and the weapon effects. Additionally, the interesting aspect of these two artifact sets are that they both rely on the fluctuations of certain statuses. Marechaussee requires you to constantly lose and or gain HP, while Harmonic Whimsy asks that you do that too, but simply with the Bond of Life. It seems a bit awkward for it to want to change the percentage of the healing blocker, whereas simply doing so with HP seems to be just a lot simpler and a lot safer since you can heal. But it also does seem like whoever can utilize whichever one seems like that's the one that they should go with. And as for the weapons, they're currently only achievable through Arlecchino's signature weapon, which is pretty hard to get and expensive to obtain unless you're lucky and or have a bunch of primos saved up. And 2 weapon types of Fontaine's 4-star weapons that you can get from the Forge, the Sword and the Catalyst. This means that you can technically force any attack scaling main DPS within these weapon types to use Harmonic Whimsy if you really wanted to, but only within those 2 weapon types. So, Arlecchino is currently the only character right now who can apply a Bond of Life to herself, and along with her scaling off of attack for damage, this is obviously a no-brainer for her to be on Fragment of Harmonic Whimsy. Her skill and first passive gives her a Bond of Life, and when her Bond of Life is present, she also receives a Pyro Infusion. And whenever she performs normal attacks that hits opponents, then her Bond of Life will decrease in increments based on her max HP. Marechaussee Hunter wouldn't really work since her health wouldn't be changing at all that much other than when she heals with a burst, which is essentially one single instance. Next is Neuvillette. His kit involves being able to consume health consistently at intervals with his prolonged charge level 2 attack, while also being able to activate a special charge attack quicker when he consumes source water droplets that are nearby that are usually summoned from his skill and his burst. Neuvillette has nothing to do with the Bond of Life, and while you could force him onto it with the Fontaine forgeable weapon, that weapon increases attack, while Harmonic Whimsy also does the same. And if you remember, attack is not a stat that Neuvillette really wants, since he pretty much thrives on HP. Marechaussee for him is definitely the better choice out of it all. It also increases his charge attack damage, which is his bread and butter. Wriothesley, he is also in the same boat. His skill state amps up his normal attacks while they simultaneously decrease his HP with each attack, while his passive allows him to occasionally heal himself with a charge attack performed on a certain condition. His own healing isn't enough on its own to even counter the amount of HP drain his normal attacks do, so there is absolutely no way that he can even come close to clearing a Bond of Life unless he has another healer. This is possible with some healers that have great synergy with him, like Jean or Charlotte for example, and the Catalyst weapon from Fontaine can work on him since he is an attack DPS. But this also requires more steps as well as more on-field time to other units that could be better used on Wriothesley being on field. The setup would end up being a DPS loss due to a longer, more complicated rotation. Lyney also wouldn't be able to use Fragment properly. Lyney's healing allows him to, at most, break even on the difference since the drain percentage and gain are both 20%. With Lyney's special charge level 2 attacks being his consistent DPS, his damage would be increased by Marechaussee 2-piece effect. Especially as a bow DPS that relies on charge attacks that don't really have too much AoE, the stat balancing of boosted crit rate helps make up for it. Fragment could work properly with a healer in the team clearing the Bond of Life, but there's one thing we're forgetting about. Lyney can't give himself a Bond of Life, and there are no weapons that do so either, as of right now of course. So even if it could work in theory, as of right now that's just completely impossible. As for his sister Lynette, she actually can use Fragment of Harmonic Whimsy quite well. If she is paired with the Fontaine 4-star sword, she can clear the Bond of Life that it gives with the use of her skill. The Bond of Life given from the sword would be 25% of the wielder's max HP, which is exactly the amount that Lynette can heal with her skill after activation. She'll then start losing 6% HP every second for the next 4 seconds, however. This means that she keeps on losing HP while not being able to really proc Fragment long enough for it to work due to her longer cooldown. Even with C4, this still presents rotational issues, since you can only get 2 stacks and her charges won't be back up by the time she takes the field again. As a support unit, this set isn't really recommended for her, but even for a main DPS build, where she is played as an Anmo main DPS at C6, there are better options, namely Marechaussee Hunter. So it feels like the characters who should be on Harmonic Whimsy should be able to clear it on their own within their own kit. Specifically from the healing that they do within their own kit, not from the external sources of healing. This would make it a lot easier to get back on the equilibrium of generally no HP really being lost in the end, which I think was the intent all along. This, however, has only had one chance to be properly executed so far, through Arlecchino. So even though I'm willing to say that right now that Marechaussee seems to be the better choice, I'm still a bit apprehensive about concluding that for later, as I'm sure that there will be a few more characters in the future who will use Bond of Life and have it already built into their kits. Additionally, while I would usually include characters who could situationally use artifact sets, forcing the Bond of Life on a character who doesn't already have it is extremely difficult. Marechaussee Hunter involves the concept of HP changing, whether it's from HP sacrifice or damage being dealt to them from enemies, whereas Fragment of Harmonic Whimsy deals with a blocker that fluctuates like health, but doesn't keep the health of the character potentially decreasing. This means that despite the 4-piece effect stating that it can give extra damage bonus when the Bond of Life changes in value, you would essentially only want to decrease it, as increasing it could only present more of a risk to your character surviving on the battlefield. This can obviously, however, can be mediated by the use of a strong shielder, but even then, that only keeps your character alive. It doesn't help change the value of the Bond of Life for you to be able to achieve more stacks. There are also only 3 weapons as of right now that can bestow a Bond of Life, with one being pretty hard to get, as it is Arlecchino's signature weapon, while the other 2 are able to be forged, but scarcity is one of the major factors. The 2 more accessible weapons are a catalyst and a sword. Pulling Arlecchino's signature weapon into the conversation, that gives us a polearm too, making it just over half of the weapon types in the game at 3 out of 5. This means that as of right now, bow and claymore characters can't use this artifact set at all, no question about it. And even when it comes to polearm, catalyst, and sword users, they all either can't use this effect since they don't really self-heal, or they just have better weapon options in general. And again, while other healers can be used to do the job, this makes things incredibly inconvenient due to the rotations being longer, leading to DPS loss. Not to mention, this mechanic seems to be very self-sufficient and self-involved, as characters who use this should be able to manage their own Bond of Life gain and healing to have prolonged periods of time on field. This makes sense since Fragment of Harmonic Whimsy is a main DPS set, so if the effect can't be sustained for longer, then the whole thing would pretty much come crashing down. The only characters I thought could probably keep the Bond of Life are healing drivers such as Kokomi and Chi-Chi, and their other counterparts as well, but even then their raw damage isn't even that high. Chi-Chi's normal attacks are not sufficient enough for her to take advantage of the buff, and Ocean 2 Claim is just way better for her anyways. Kokomi deals most of her damage, which specifically has no chance to crit. through a combined effort of her Hydro damage bonus, her max HP, and her healing bonus. And these are just a few of the examples that I thought of. I also looked at other healing drivers and other true main DPSs, but honestly to no avail. It really seems like this time, forcing this brand new artifact set onto other characters with the Bond of Life mechanic is pretty impossible. So yeah, this is a very interesting mechanic to discuss, and since we haven't really seen anything like it since Corrosion, I thought it'd be great to focus on it with the ushering of a new artifact set. I think it's a cool mechanic that still needs some fleshing out though, since there really is only one character who can use it, but then again, I'm sure we're going to get more characters in the future who can. I've been getting these scripts done quicker, so I think I can start my weapon series soon, but not until before the next episode is released. But yeah, you already know what button to press if you want to see more on a regular basis, and if you have something to say, I can only hope that it's nice. Thank you, bye!